Geologists will tell you that the Appalachian Mountains are among the oldest on Earth. They will tell you about tectonic plates and erosion. But the people who live in the shadows of these peaks, they know a different truth. They know that these mountains are older than the Atlantic Ocean. They are older than the bones of the first predator. And in that kind of age, something lingers. It is a place where the air feels heavy, as if the forest itself is watching your every step. Here the laws of the modern world don't apply. Here there are rules. Rules written in blood and passed down through whispers by those who survived the night. Today we open the U.S. dark files on the silent terror of the Appalachian wilderness. If you ever find yourself hiking deep in the hollers of Tennessee or the forests of West Virginia, you might feel a sudden chill. Even in the heat of July. If the birds suddenly stop singing, if the wind dies down until there is a complete unnatural silence, you have entered the quiet. The first rule of the Appalachians is simple: if you hear someone calling your name from the woods, no you didn't. Do not answer. Do not look for the source. Mimicry is the favorite tool of the things that hide here. They can sound like your mother. They can sound like a crying infant. They can even sound like your own voice screaming for help. But remember, if it's coming from the deep brush where no human should be, it isn't human. And then there is the whistling. In the city, a whistle is a tune. In the mountains it's an invitation. Never whistle in the dark. Because in these woods something might whistle back. And it won't be a bird. It will be something that has been waiting for a signal to find you. In recent years, a new file has emerged from the Appalachian Deep. Witnesses call it the knot deer. At a distance, it looks like a common white-tailed deer. But as it gets closer, the horror begins to unfold. Its limbs are too long. Its joints bend in ways that defy biology. It doesn't run from humans, it stares. It stares with eyes that are located in the front of its head, the mark of a predator. One witness in rural Kentucky reported seeing a knot deer standing on its hind legs, staring through a second-story window. It didn't make a sound. It just vibrated with a low, guttural energy that made the witness feel physically ill. This isn't a glitch in the woods. It's something ancient trying to wear a skin it doesn't understand. A predator attempting to blend in, and failing just enough to be terrifying. The mountains don't just scare people, they swallow them. Hundreds of documented cases of disappearances in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park remain unsolved. These aren't just lost hikers. These are people who were there 1 second, and gone the next. Often in areas that had been searched dozens of times. Search teams have reported finding clothing and boots miles away from the last known location, perfectly intact as if the person was simply lifted out of them. No struggle. No blood. Just an empty space where a human life used to be. Some say it's the cave systems, miles and miles of uncharted tunnels that breathe like a living lung beneath the earth. Others believe the mountains themselves decide who gets to leave, and who becomes part of the soil. To understand the true nature of these mountains, we must listen to those who barely made it out. Consider the account of a veteran park ranger who we will call Mark. In the summer of 1994, Mark was patrolling a remote section of the Blue Ridge Parkway, an area known for its dense fog and jagged cliffs. It was 3 in the morning when Mark's radio began to emit a strange rhythmic static. It wasn't the usual white noise. It sounded like breathing. Heavy, wet breathing. He stepped out of his vehicle, his flashlight cutting through the mist. That's when he saw it. Standing on the edge of the road was what looked like a man, nearly 7 feet tall, but its skin was the color of old ash. Mark reported that the figure didn't move. It just stood there, staring with eyes that reflected his flashlight like a predator's. But the most disturbing part? The figure began to mimic the sound of Mark's own radio, the exact same static, the exact same breathing. Mark didn't wait. He got back in his truck and drove until he hit the nearest town. When he checked his radio later, it was turned off. It had been off the whole time. Then there is the story of Sarah, a solo hiker in the Great Smoky Mountains. Sarah was an expert, a woman who knew the trails like the back of her hand. But one afternoon near Clingman's Dome, she realized the trail she was on didn't exist. The trees looked familiar, but the path was wrong. It was heading down into a valley that wasn't on any map. She decided to turn back, but as she turned, she heard a whistle. A long, low note that seemed to come from right behind her ear. She ran. She didn't look back until she reached her car hours later. When she got home and took off her hiking boots, she found something that still haunts her to this day. Tucked inside her sock was a small, perfectly carved stone whistle. She has no memory of anyone getting close enough to put it there. To truly understand why people vanish in the Appalachians, you have to look beneath your feet. Beneath the moss, the roots, and the soil, lies one of the most extensive and unexplored cave systems in the entire world. Thousands of miles of limestone tunnels, many of which have never seen the light of a flashlight. Locals in the deep hollers believe these caves aren't just holes in the ground. They call them the lungs of the mountain. There are stories of hunters who, while resting against a rock face, felt the stone behind them move, like a chest rising and falling in sleep. They describe a low rhythmic vibration that resonates in your very teeth. But it's what lives in these dark, damp corridors that keeps the elders awake at night. There are legends, some dating back to the Cherokee ancestors of the Moon-Eyed people. Beings that cannot stand the sun, with pale skin and large, glowing eyes, who moved underground centuries ago. Could these ancient residents be the ones responsible for the sudden silences? Are they the ones who know the secret paths that lead to places not found on any GPS? Imagine being a hiker miles from the nearest road. You see a small opening in the rocks, shrouded by ferns. You feel a cool breeze coming from within, a breeze that smells of wet earth and something metallic. You hear a sound like a soft, melodic hum, echoing from the depths. If you feel the urge to step inside, run. Because once you enter the mountain's throat, the mountain rarely spits you back out. This brings us to the most chilling part of the U.S. Dark Files: the patterns of disappearance. In the Great Smoky Mountains, people don't just get lost. They are erased. There is a phenomenon often discussed in Missing 411 Circles, the invisible wall. Survivors who were found days later, dehydrated and confused, often tell the same strange story. They describe walking down a familiar trail, when suddenly the world seems to glitch. The air becomes thick like walking through water. The sounds of the forest vanish, replaced by a high-pitched ringing. They turn around and the trail is gone, replaced by a wall of trees that wasn't there seconds before. It's as if they stepped through a doorway into a version of the Appalachians that doesn't want them to leave. Then there are the children. Children who vanish in the blink of an eye, only to be found miles away, at the top of a vertical cliff that even an experienced climber would struggle to scale. They have no scratches, no mud on their shoes, and no memory of how they got there. When asked, they often speak of the gray man, or the large bear that talked. These aren't just hallucinations of a frightened child. These are consistent reports that have baffled authorities for over a century. But the mysteries of the Appalachians aren't only biological or supernatural. Some are man-made. Hidden beneath the ancient limestone are secrets that the government has spent billions of dollars to keep out of the public eye. Deep within the mountains of Virginia and West Virginia lie massive underground bunkers, like Mount Weather and Raven Rock. These are the continuity of government facilities. Cities carved into the granite, designed to hold thousands of people in the event of a global catastrophe. But locals tell a different story. They speak of unmarked black helicopters flying low over the ridges at 3 in the morning. They speak of strange vibrations coming from deep underground, vibrations that don't match the seismic activity of the region. Why choose these mountains? Is it just for the protection of the rock? Or are these facilities built there to monitor something that was already inside the mountain? Some whistleblowers have claimed that during the excavation of these bunkers, workers broke into natural cavern systems that weren't empty. They found symbols on the walls that didn't match any known civilization. Since then, those sections have been sealed with 10-foot thick reinforced concrete. What are they hiding? Or more importantly, what are they keeping trapped inside? Perhaps the most unsettling file in our collection is the time slip phenomenon. Hikers in the Appalachians often report a strange sensation of being watched, followed by a sudden bout of nausea. When they check their watches or their phones, they realize that hours have passed in what felt like only minutes. Take the case of a young couple hiking in the Shenandoah Valley. They reported stepping into a patch of forest where the air felt strangely cold and vibrant. They walked for what they thought was 15 minutes. When they emerged back onto the main trail, they were shocked to find that search parties had been looking for them for 3 days. To them it was a short walk. To the rest of the world, they had vanished for 72 hours. Is it possible that the intense magnetic fields of these ancient mountains create portals? Folds in reality where time doesn't flow in a straight line? If you are walking a trail and the sun suddenly seems to be in the wrong position, or if you notice that the trees around you look like species that have been extinct for thousands of years, you may have stepped out of our time. And in the Appalachians, once you step out of time, finding your way back is never guaranteed. Hidden in the deep valleys or hollers are towns that no longer exist on any modern map. Coal mining communities that were abandoned overnight in the early 1900s. In places like Thurmond or Nuttleburg, the buildings still stand frozen in time. But if you walk through these ghost towns at twilight, you will realize they are not empty. You can hear the sound of a pickaxe hitting the rock, even though the mines have been sealed for a century. The locals who live on the outskirts of these ruins speak of the neighbors. They aren't ghosts. They are physical. They look like people, but their movements are jerky like a film skipping frames. They stand in the windows of abandoned churches watching. They don't attack. They just wait. Waiting for a traveler to get curious enough to step inside. The old saying goes, if the house looks lived in but the chimney has no smoke, keep walking. In the Appalachians, a warm welcome is often a final trap. If you travel to Burke County, North Carolina, and stand on the Linville Gorge overlooks, you might witness a phenomenon that has baffled scientists for over a century: the Brown Mountain Lights. These are not satellites and they aren't the headlights of cars. They are colorful orbs of light, red, blue, and ghostly white, that rise from the valley and float aimlessly above the ridges. The Cherokee legends say these are the spirits of women searching for their lost warriors. But modern witnesses describe something more sentient. Some claim the lights reacted to their presence, following their movements across the cliffside. In the 1950s, a group of hikers reported that one of these orbs hovered just feet away from their campsite. They described a sound like a low-frequency electrical hum and a smell like burning ozone. When the light vanished, the hikers found that all the batteries in their flashlights and cameras had been completely drained. Whatever these lights are, they aren't just light. They are energy looking for a way into our world. There is a darker theory whispered in the backroads of the Smokies, one that even the National Park Service refuses to acknowledge: feral humans. Stories of families who moved into the deepest, most inaccessible parts of the mountains generations ago and never came back out. Over decades they have adapted to the darkness. They don't use fire. They don't use tools. They have become the ultimate apex predators of the Appalachians. Missing person reports often mention vocalizations that sound like human screams but with a frequency that no human throat should be able to produce. Hunters have found nests made of woven branches and bones in the high canopies of trees. If you are camping and you hear something moving outside your tent that sounds like it's walking on two legs, but it's moving with the speed of a deer, do not open the zipper. These ferals know the terrain better than any ranger. They are the reason why, in some disappearance cases, the victim's clothes are found perfectly folded miles away, but the person is never seen again. Geologists will tell you that the Appalachians are made of ancient granite and quartz. These minerals have a unique property: they can conduct and store energy. Some researchers call this the stone tape theory. They believe the mountains themselves are a giant recording device, capturing the most traumatic events of the past. In the areas where bloody Civil War battles were fought in the mountain passes, the rocks seem to play back the screams of the fallen. Hikers have reported hearing the sound of a phantom cavalry, hundreds of horses galloping through the forest, only for the sound to vanish the moment they reach the clearing. But it's not just the past that is recorded. Some say the mountains can echo the future. Have you ever heard your own voice calling out to you from the woods, saying words you haven't spoken yet? If the mountain starts to echo your future, it means you've already become part of its history. And history in these parts is written in shadow. There is a phenomenon reported by those who spend weeks on the Appalachian Trail, something known as the ridge walkers. These aren't creatures of flesh and blood but silhouettes, shadows that are darker than the night surrounding them. Hikers often spot them out of the corner of their eye, standing perfectly still on the highest rocky outcrops, silhouetted against the moonlight. They don't have faces. They don't have clothing. They are simply voids in the shape of tall, thin men. What makes them terrifying is their movement. When you look directly at them, they don't run. They simply vanish. But minutes later, you'll see them again 5 miles ahead of you on a peak that should have taken hours to reach. Some say they are the guardians of the mountain's deepest secrets. Others believe they are manifestations of the mountain's own consciousness, observing the intruders who dare to walk its spine. If you see a ridge walker, do not wave. Do not signal. To them, an invitation is a contract, and you don't want to know what they collect as payment. In the deepest parts of the Appalachian hollers, where the old families still practice granny magic and folk medicine, you might stumble upon a disturbing sight: the stitching. You'll find a grove of trees where the branches have been intentionally bent and tied together with rotted leather or human hair, forming a living tunnel that leads nowhere. These are not natural formations. These are spirit traps. Local lore says that these trees are stitched to keep something contained within a specific valley. If you find a stitched grove, notice the silence. Even the insects won't cross the threshold. Many who have accidentally walked through these natural tunnels report a sudden, overwhelming sense of grief, as if they are feeling the cumulative sorrow of everyone who has ever died in those woods. The rule here is simple: never cut the ties. Never break a branch. If you disturb the stitching, you aren't just damaging a tree, you are opening a door that was meant to stay locked until the mountains turn to dust.